Well, welcome back. I was just saying to those who've joined later, Easter seems a long time ago, but it's still appropriate. We're still in Easter season. So I was saying in church yesterday, Happy Easter. So happy Easter to those who I haven't seen and haven't seen me. But we're going to follow the resurrection event in two parts of the story, in a way. I'm going to read first from John 21 to 11, and then pick it up from, sorry, 1 to 10, and then picking up from 11 a bit later on. Early on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb. It was still dark. She saw that the stone had been moved away from the entrance. So she ran to Simon Peter and another disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started out for the tomb. Both of them were running. The other disciple ran faster than Peter. He reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him. He went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there. He also saw the funeral cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place. It was separate from the linen. The disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. The John version of the story, I think, has got quite a lot of detail in it that is not really picked up in the Synoptic Matthew, Mark and Luke version. And one of the things that I've been talking about over Easter is the fact that John is writing for people a lot later. So Matthew, Mark and Luke are writing to people who were either there or were associated with people who were there. So there was kind of a direct line of witness. But John, writing maybe around as late as 100 AD, or at least that's when it's collected together, is writing for people who haven't had the opportunity to see Jesus, have not probably known people who witness that directly for themselves. But one of the things I was reflecting on, I was at Mickle Hill this morning, and I might say one or two things about that later, is kind of not so much what is the evidence and what is it that shows us that this is part of a true story, but what is it that the gospel writers and ultimately today the artists bring to the story that help us to see another way in, help us to understand, and how we, 2,000 years on, not witnesses to the resurrection in the sense that we didn't know Jesus before or after the empty tomb, but that we still are witnesses and still part of the story and try and make sense for ourselves today. In a way, we haven't got a great number of stations of the cross because traditionally the stations end on Good Friday and the burial, but other people do take it further. There was an interesting conversation over the last couple of years in Malton when we've done the Churches Together event in the Market Square. Should it be on Good Friday that we stop at the death or the burial, or should we take it on further, recognizing that the general populace will not be in church on Easter Sunday morning, and we want to tell them there is good news at the end of the story? And it's been quite a source of tension, really, between those who think you can't possibly do Easter Day until you finish Good Friday, and those who want to push on and tell the whole story, recognizing that not everybody will be present on Easter Day to hear the message. So maybe that's part of the reasoning that the artists with the Stations of the Cross haven't taken it further. But I start where I should have finished last time, when we finished a fortnight ago, no, 3 weeks ago, and we did the burial. Christine said, wasn't there a burial in the modern sect of pictures? And there was, and I had stopped the presentation one picture too soon. So you have burial and resurrection. And it's pretty simple, isn't it? So the left-hand one is a mummy-shaped mummy, and the right-hand one is a very alive Jesus. We were also interested, and I hadn't remembered this. We were helping our daughter Anna clear her bookshelves and sort out what she's taking in to move to her new house. And one of the Good News Bibles that she has, the front cover and through the book, have got this sort of emoji-sized picture, not just of Jesus, but of Old Testament prophets and different events. So it was quite interesting to look at those and to see kind of how simple you can make an image, but it's still recognizable, whether it's Abraham, Isaac, whether it's one of the disciples or whoever. But let's start at the very beginning with one of the more modern emoji style resurrection pictures. And notice no marks in the hand, but I think there is a little reference to the wound in the side. And interestingly, not a halo, but the whole body is glowing with light, that sense of radiation. I did show this last year, but I still think it's one of the cleverest pieces of creativity that I use on Easter Day. That whole notion that when somebody dies, their pulse rate flatlines, and so the resurrection is the reverse. So you have a flat line that then starts pulsing away. This comes from a few years ago through 12 Baskets and their imagery. But I just think that's a really clever image. And yeah, you can ask questions about exactly what it's showing and is it about resuscitation or resurrection. But I still think in terms of that modern image about life and death, how do we know somebody's died? Because when you watch it on Casualty, it goes and just flat lines, and then when they're shocked back, it sort of jumps up and starts going again. So I still like this as an image. But we'll come on to what few series of Stations of the Cross images there are. And the question I want to get you to think about, and we'll have a conversation in a few moments, is about how do you depict the resurrection? I mean, that's what we're looking at. And I suppose a more deeper question is, how do these pictures actually help us to see the resurrection? And what are they depicting? And I ask that particularly because I think, although we recognize in the Stations of the Cross that we've looked at earlier, there are both gospel stories referenced and, if you like, myth stories, those legends that have accumulated, so Veronica's cloth and so on. But they are depicting historic events and what you can imagine it would have been like. I think when it comes to the resurrection, it's much more difficult to think, how did the disciples and others witness the resurrection body? And so as we look at these images, I want you to think about, is this what I expect to see? Or does this accord with my theological understanding of what resurrection is about? And in a way, I think this one raises those questions exactly. So from the Benedictine sisters, it is a corporal body, so it is a bodily resurrection. There are the marks, not in the palm of the hand, but at the wrists. You can just see the red blood on the wrists. Jesus is wearing a tunic, so you can't see a mark in his side or in his feet. You have the halo that you might expect of Jesus in a religious picture. But I think the interesting thing with this is the white lining around the body. If you remember the earlier pictures, they hadn't got that there. And there is kind of, I mean, if I'm being very, what's the word? I'll say rude, but you know what I mean. It's a bit like the Weetabix glow. So, you know what I mean?
Ready Breck.
Sorry, Ready Breck. Thank you, my dear. Yes, Ready Breck. I'm wrong. Yes, you knew what I meant. I think they're trying to say this isn't quite the same.
Mm.
It is a resurrection body, but it's different. One of the things I was reflecting on in my sermon yesterday was the description, which comes up a bit in John's Gospel, but it comes up more in the 1 John reading, the epistle reading, and it talks about light. I mean, the light and darkness is picking up from the imagery of the prologue of John. Light has come into the world, and saying that light is intangible, but you can see it, it's there. And I think that's kind of what they're trying to pick out, that here is a corporal body, but it is changed and it is made into something light and lighter, if you like. So I can see what they're trying to do. And I think, again, the little plants growing at the front, I don't know what they are, but I think they're also trying to say something about new life and spring. I mean, I've made the point before that what it must be like to have Easter in autumn when things are dying, rather than in spring when the world is here in this northern hemisphere, when things are coming back to life.
The halo is very much like a sun, isn't it?
It is, yeah, yeah. It's picking up some of the images of dawn as well.
The light coming from behind also will make the body shimmer around the edges.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Every cloud has a silver lining.
I think it's the light and the brightness of the light as opposed to the darkness of Good Friday.
Yeah.
That, and the colour yellow just sort of sings that to me, to be honest.
Yeah. And I think it's dawn because the houses in the background have got lights in their windows. So there's a number of things going on there. Yeah. And I would want to see the reality of it rather than this image of it. But there is something of darkness here. It's almost as if Jesus is coming up out of darkness, out of water. Let me just see if I can focus that up. But it's hard to know quite what is here amongst the green. But or is it could just be the dark of the earth? But there is a sense of rising physically from the ground, as well as rising metaphorically from death.
So where is this picture then?
This is part of their Stations of the Cross series that you can buy.
All right.
Yeah. So they do take it to the end, which is why it's number 16. So yeah.
And visible in Pickering Parish Church.
Yes. Yeah, they've got them round. Yeah, we had a set in one of my last churches, and we put them around the walls at Easter. Yeah. And the Benedictine sisters are the ones who illustrate the Methodist communion service. So if you've seen when I've done communion services on screen on PowerPoint, it's their images that are used in that. Not this one, but the ones they do associated with communion. It was commissioned.
Yeah, I like these.
I still think this is one of my favourite.
Amazing.
So, I mean, that movement of the hand, Mary reaching out, Jesus sitting serenely, almost Buddha-like, isn't he? But it's also referencing the Sistine Chapel and the Adam and God, the moment of the vital spark flowing from one to the other, the spark of life. I just think he's really captured something very, very special, very important. And I haven't got it, but if you remember back, the burial one is of Jesus on the catafalque and Mary sitting with her back to the body lying in the tomb, and even now she is on her knees before him. They're both at the same level. I think there's something quite important about the fact they're not both standing up. We'll see a lot of images of them both standing up, but the fact that neither of them are standing up is an important part of the story.
I love these wood carvings. They're so intimate.
Yeah.
Something very personal about them.
Yeah. I'd give a mouse for him.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm.
This is from the forest stations, the ones in Lincoln Cathedral, using all these different bits of wood. This is interesting because there is no body. I mean, it's called illumination. I think in a way, it's about the stone is almost still there in the midst of the picture, and then the radiating lines coming out from it, some of which he's scored in such a way that you see the bare wood underneath the varnish, and there's an element of light coming from it.
That's almost like sunrise again, isn't
It is,
it?
yeah, it is
Yeah.
absolutely so. Yeah, yeah, it is a dawn image. Yeah.
I saw these when I went to the Walsingham pilgrimage.
All
We
right.
stopped in Lincoln, and they were incredible.
Yes,
They were very moving.
they are.
Yeah.
They are. I mean, he must have spent hours selecting the right piece of wood.
Mm.
I mean, if you look what you've got within this, I mean, you've got the rings from the center. So, all of this is a single piece of wood. And then out here, you've got other branches that are coming off that are forming new life. And just the light and dark, the contrast of the natural wood is very spectacular. It must have taken him, I was going to say hours, but
To
almost
choose.
years, I think, to
Right.
hone each one of them. Yeah, wonderful. But I just think, I would want to ask the artist, why have you not depicted the tomb open? Why have you not depicted a body? I don't think. Let me just reach across. Don't think.
Maybe it's the moment of resurrection before the stone is pushed away.
Yeah,
And the light is getting out of the cracks around the stone.
yeah, yeah. Yes, it's subtitled Awareness, Enlightenment, Insight, Inspiration, Understanding. Sacrificing the truth, all that energy. So bizarre. The truth lived on 2,000 years ago. It lives today, as does the crowd. Remember, we often reference the crowd. Look for awareness in enlightenment, insight into inspiration, and understanding of illumination. And I think in that way, because remember again back to some of the pictures that we saw, William Fairbank was both referencing the past but also the present. So he was often talking about quite political issues around about prisoners and political and religious prisoners, but wanting to make you think about what it is for today, not just an event of the past. Yeah. From Southwellminster, a very interesting depiction in that this to me is closest to what we would see in a burial today. If you go to a funeral where there is a burial, there will be a hole in the ground exactly like this. I mean, you won't roll a stone over it, but you'll fill it in with the soil. But it's a person-shaped hole, and rather than our sort of slightly, I don't know what the description is of the coffin shape, but you know what I mean, that sort of slightly diamond oblongy shape that we have for a coffin. And other stones around as well. And then it doesn't matter who it is. I think it's a male figure, not a female figure, but I haven't got a view from the other side. I don't think I've got another, no. I can't remember whether that's Mary or whether it's supposed to be Peter looking into the tomb, but it's certainly not Jesus out of the tomb. It's an observer looking in, yeah, and wondering.
And the pebbles are almost like Easter eggs.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're new life as well.
Yeah, that's right. I have to go back and photograph from the other side. I couldn't find one from the other side. I did look for one, but I didn't see one online. And then I think this is the last of the series that we've been following. So Nicholas Martel, who many people have said they've appreciated most of all. I mean, the most significant difference, of course, is there's nothing black. Every other picture has it's been about the darkness and the black, and this is purely in red and white. But an angel, not Jesus. Again, the stone is sort of moved away from the entrance. The light bursting out. It's almost the moment of resurrection, isn't it? So
Yeah.
the stone is physically being moved in that sense of the light spilling out as the stone moves away. And it relates to the story that I've just read of the angels in white sitting on the tomb and speaking to Mary, that we'll come to in a moment.
Like the power of the resurrection pushed away the stone.
Yeah. Yes, and although those big blocks of colour to the top right and the bottom left-hand side are red and not black, you get the sense of the light dispelling the darkness, almost transforming the darkness. Yeah. So that's the last of the station series, but I'm just going to show a few pictures, some of which we did look at last year, which are other, mostly more modern images of Resurrection Day. I have to say this one of Richard Bavins is one of my favourites because it's just so simple. There is contrast and colour in it, but the contrast is of the light outside the tomb and the darkness inside the tomb. But I just want you to again, and I will ask the question more formally in a moment. Just look at these and which of these portrays for you the best image of resurrection. Which one speaks to you of resurrection? I love the steps in this because it encourages you to go out, doesn't it? It's almost as if we're part of the darkness inside the tomb, and we're being shown that there is light outside. So we're almost being encouraged to walk up the steps and walk out into the light rather than being on the outside looking in. We were teasing earlier about the current solar eclipse. There's elements of that in that picture, aren't there? And we contrast that with the darkness of the moment at 3 o'clock on Good Friday. There's subtle references to different things. I'm not sure whether I like this or not. I mean, it's a similar image from the same angle, but it's almost cosmic. I mean, the darkness on the left. I mean, again, referencing what we were just saying about the solar eclipse. I mean, it's almost
like the Milky Way.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it really is. I don't know whether he's actually, worked it out, but that's certainly what it shows to me. It's more ethereal than solid, I think. One of the things that came through this morning on something that Chris and I have an email comes on every Monday called Theology Today, and the person who was writing it, George Bailey, on the staff at Cliff College, was talking about whether there are ways that we can use the resurrection to talk about ecology and climate and all the things that we should be doing. And I thought, yeah, this kind of picks that up, that it is living in the universe. It's not an event that's outside of time and space. I think I still prefer Bavin to Thomas, I think.
It's a bit mystic, that one.
Yeah. And this kind of comes in between, doesn't it? I mean, I presume that this is Mary and Jesus, the bit we'll come to in a moment, but I just put it in because it's part of that same sequence of looking from the inside out. the steps, the grave clothes, and the figures. And often figures at a distance, figures in the morning mist, are indistinct in that way. We looked at this one last year, and Dinah O'Kendall, a contemporary artist, just towards the end of her working life now. And again, I'm not quite sure what I make of this. There were times when I look at it and I think I like what she's trying to depict, and then I look at it again and think it's trying to be too realistic.
Bit Bruegelish.
Yeah. I mean, it's about the dawn. I mean, if you look in the background, through the gate itself is significant, and the dawn is there. It's the road. Is it the road to Emmaus? People have come with torches, so it's early in the morning. It's the women coming to dress the body and to put on the spices. Interestingly, it's got that same cutout shape as we saw at Southall Minster. And then the two people in white, I'll read that part of the story in a moment, because we'll pick up a bit more on the Mary story in a moment. But of those, which reflects resurrection to you? What do you think would be your artistic exposition of resurrection?
I like the previous one where you're looking out and seeing Mary and Jesus. I think that's beautiful.
This one, yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It is.
It just looks misty early morning, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
That's
does.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yes, for those who got up early on the Easter morning, it was misty. We didn't see the sun until a bit later, but yeah, the mist was there. Graham.
I'm interested in whether we actually think it's a reanimation of the dead body, or whether something's happened in the tomb where it's completely changed. And I think I quite like the idea that it's behind in the tomb that it happens. Because obviously if the body's gone, that's energy destroyed, and that is catastrophic. In the fact that that's a nuclear explosion, and yet it's that mystery I think that I quite like. But it's not physics.
Something happened.
Yeah, but it's something, as you said, it's something that happens in our time and in our space, and so therefore it's got to be something that's possible almost.
Yeah,
you understand
it's possible and impossible, isn't it?
Yeah. I like Nicholas Markel's one, where you've got that energy behind the tomb, and it's suddenly exploding. In fact, in one of the accounts, doesn't it say the stone is split in two? And there was a bright light. I think the soldiers said it was a bright light and the stone was split in two. And then you've got that time when Jesus can't be touched.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we're back to something that's in our, it's just that sort of
beyond
quantum event. It's just, to me, it's just mind blowing.
I think undoubtedly it is more than reanimation. It's not as though his heart stopped and 3 days later it starts again. I think it is more amazing than that, more wonderful than that. And I think in a way that Sisters of Turvey Abbey picture, just lined around in white, it kind of just says that in a very subtle way. So it is. I mean, people always say, well, if you don't believe in the bodily resurrection, the full bodily resurrection, then you don't really believe in the resurrection. And then I say, well, okay, so how does he appear in a locked room? You know, you're into Conan Doyle territory or something.
Mhm.
That's not the argument I want to have. I mean, it's different, and
It's not a human. He's not human anymore.
absolutely,
He's
yeah,
passed through.
yeah,
And so, yeah,
But as
but
a
we can't
visual,
understand it. Yeah.
John Peter.
yeah, as a visual image, I mean, you said a few moments ago, it's almost too realistic.
Yeah.
And in many ways, it's an impossibility, isn't it, to portray, and therefore the referencing of the key features without trying to detail the human figure. For me, some of the strongest expressions of the expression are when the figure itself is absent or muted or esoteric or vague. That requires more of me to work with it, as opposed to perhaps the turvy-abby ones where, yes, I think artistically very good, but they don't take me anywhere.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's the difference between an artistic representation and a scientific representation. You know, I don't want a scientific representation. I don't want people to explain away how the resurrection happened. I want to have a degree of mystery about it, because I think that is part of our faith. That it's not something you scientifically can prove. And if somebody, I don't think they ever will, but if somebody dug up Jesus's body in Jerusalem today, it wouldn't worry me. You know, if somebody said, well, he was dead all the time, wouldn't particularly worry me. I think it's about the experience of the disciples and Mary's and so on, more than whether it was a resuscitation of a dead corpse.
I like that representation in the film Risen, where after, in the upper room, the centurion who's playing the part can't see Jesus, but everybody else can.
Okay.
And so you've got that, but I still think it has to be, they have to have seen the body. It can't just have been a spiritual experience.
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
And so I like Peter's idea that, what happens in the garden is all rather ethereal, but it's got to become more concrete as the day goes on, or as the weeks go on.
Yeah.
Well, if Thomas looked at his hands, touched his hands and touched his side, then there was obviously a human-looking form with the injuries.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was picking up, I was saying I was at Mickle Hill this morning, and we looked at the Mary story, which I'll read in a moment, and then we looked at the Thomas story. And in the Thomas story, it doesn't say that Thomas does it. He says, "I need to do it," but when he sees Jesus, Jesus says, "You can do it," but there's no record that he actually does it. And I think it's probably that moment that seeing is believing without needing to physically touch. But the bit I hadn't quite clocked before, or not in quite the same way, let me just see if I can find it. Where is it? Okay, so on the first day of the week, so this is Easter Sunday night, Jesus came in and stood among them. He said, "May peace be with you." Then he showed them his hands and his side. And then Thomas comes after that and says, "Unless I see it for myself." So the disciples needed that amount of proof. It wasn't just that they saw Jesus. They actually needed to see the marks to kind of show that it was the dead person come back to life. But then when Thomas says, "Well, I must see them," actually when he sees Jesus, without investigating intimately that they really are there, then he's the one who says, "My Lord and my God." He's the one who who freely makes a confession of faith. So it's very interesting what we think is in the Bible and what is actually in the Bible sometimes.
Mm.
Okay.
Can I, Peter, with this Diana Raw candle image,
Yeah.
I can't work out, it's probably bad eyesight, what's happening in the figure in the foreground.
I was just looking at that. I wondered if it's like the Firebird, like
But what is it referencing?
what is that?
I don't know. I mean, it's almost like whether it's just the rising of a bird, a takeoff moment. I don't know. I think I'd have to go back through the other pictures. I think the character's dress follows through from image to image.
Mm.
So Mary is the person here, Mary the mother, is the person here in the blue stripe, and that person reappears. And the person here in red, I think one of these two is Mary Magdalene. So there is some sort of follow through in the imagery, and I'd have to look, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't say. Talk amongst yourselves for a moment.
Not the phoenix risen from.
So yeah, that's what I was wondering, Mary. Yeah. Can't see her.
Mm.
Some are repeated, some are not.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right. No, it's fine. It's the right questions to be asking. I can't see the book. It's on that shelf somewhere. Because she does go into some. Well, she gives some commentary on her pictures, but I'll have to see if I can dig it out.
Yeah.
Okay. We did look at this last year, but I've come across it again this year. Interestingly, what I hadn't picked up was its roots. So, in 2000, for the millennium, over in Norfolk and Suffolk, they commissioned a series of 12 Stations of the Cross that were put in different churches around the area. And it came out in a book called Stations, the New Sacred Art. And interestingly, one of the series that was out there that was used was the series by Michael Kenny, the more sort of black and white ones, which sometimes were more abstract. You'll remember those. And actually, by the time the series was put into one of the churches, he had actually died. So he was commissioned to do them. He painted them, and then his life ended. And I was quite interested because what I hadn't realised is how a number of those artists are other people in the Methodist art collection. So if I just read down some of the names, Norman Adams. So Norman Adams is a very powerful, very bright yellow Palm Sunday image in the Methodist art collection. Mark Cazalet has got, I think, 2 or 3 pictures in. Francis Hoyland, which are some of the diptych pictures with different images around, and then Nicholas Minear. So it's quite interesting that one of the people on the Methodist art committee was one of the leading lights in commissioning some of this work, and so it was obviously quite an important thing. And I literally got the book last week because I only stumbled across it when I was looking for something else, getting ready for today. Most of those don't go on to Resurrection Pictures, as I would have shown them, but there's another whole series there of another 12 artists and another 12 sets of pictures that you could look at. Nicholas Minear is the one whose picture in the Methodist art collection is the escape to Egypt, where Mary, Joseph, the baby, and the donkey are underneath a tree on escape. Very vivid blue sky. And he uses these vivid colours and very similar shapes. The trees here, these very lozenge-shaped trees what he uses in those pictures. And I think he's trying to do two things, isn't he? He's trying to give something of a pictorial representation of the gospel story, but also is trying to give something of the metaphysics of it, the spirituality of it. So you've got the fire within the cave. I mean, it's almost back referencing Elijah and first there was the fire, and then there was the wind, and then there was a still small voice.
Daniel.
And Daniel as well, yeah. Daniel in the lions, in the flaming furnace, yeah. And it's difficult to tell whether these are male or female figures. I mean, is it Mary with Peter and John who have come? But it's a very bright, in your face image, isn't it?
It's titled "The Women" at the end.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for reading that.
Yeah.
I was looking at the picture, Helen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Before we move on to the more about the Mary story and the garden, I just picked this one up. So this is out of the series of images from America. Do you remember Smithsonian Institute, where they had taken pictures out of their gallery collection and allied them with Stations of the Cross? And this is called Good Morning with Roses, but is quite hard in a sense to see the roses. I mean, it's a splattering of red paint, as you will see. It's sort of a single Jackson Pollock in some ways.
Slicking.
But what was interesting, all the other pictures, there was a commentary associated with them. So if you went round and did the tour online or actually in the gallery, there was a commentary about the pictures and what was in the pictures and so on. When we got to this, there is no commentary. There is just a poem. So I'm going to just read the poem, and it's quite an interesting reflection, called "Rosing from the Dead." So that's the references to roses, but I was also, as some of the people here will know, I was playing with the idea of a rose on Easter Day, and we were giving out roses to people. So this is a family reflection. We are on our way home from Good Friday service. It is dark. It is silent. Sunday, says Hannah, Jesus will be rosing from the dead. You can imagine a young child saying those words. It must have been like that, a white blossom or maybe a red one, pulsing from the floor of the tomb, reaching round the Easter stone and levering it aside with pliant thorns. The soldiers overcome with the fragrance, and Mary at sunrise, mistaking the dawn-dewed rose of Sharon for the untamable gardener. You don't need a commentary, do you? Just for those words. I think that's lovely. And if I'd have found it, you might have got that on Easter Day as well. One other picture that I came across just last week when I was preparing for this is this empty tomb by Ghislaine Howard. Ghislaine Howard, again, has got a picture in the Methodist Art Collection. She's the one which shows Jesus washing the feet. Very blue, swirly picture. So from the millennium and onwards at Liverpool Cathedral, they did a series of pictures. Almost, it wasn't quite one a year, but the Stations of the Cross, different artists were asked to give something to the cathedral. And this is what she submitted, and I'll show you. That's the picture, and that's how it is, and that in itself is significant. So it's housed in a steel reliquary, 4 foot by 8 foot canvas, a bit smaller than the one you saw, Julia, but still a fair old size. It means that the body is more than life size. But interestingly, what Ghislaine Howard did was to go round Liverpool in the early mornings and she would sketch people who were homeless, or more particularly when it came to this, she would sketch people, homeless people who had got up and left their clothes, their sleeping bag, their cardboard boxes, and that sense of them rising to new life. And so this was the image that she wanted to use. And of course, the question you asked is kind of, is there a body there or not? Because when you know that, you see an empty sleeping bag, you can't always tell whether there's anybody inside it or not. You see a pile of cardboard boxes on the street, and you can't always be sure whether somebody is inside or underneath them or not. And so she's kind of just playing with your mind a little bit. My guess is that there is no body because the middle is kind of deflated, gone flat. But that now is in Liverpool Cathedral. We haven't been since 2008, so we haven't seen it. But I just thought that was a very interesting image. Say it is part of a series, but different artists did different pictures. Ghislaine Howard has done a couple of Stations of the Cross series, which I have been looking at, but they're more, dare I say, if I can be slightly snooty about art, they're more swirly pictures. So she's taken some paint and done through. And it's more than abstract, Peter, but it's not something that grabbed me, and I wanted to show you lots of her work. But I thought this one was really powerful and set within a steel reliquary, so it's almost sort of set within a box or a shrine, where it's referencing a tomb or an ossuary where the bones are collected and stored after the event. So I'm going to read the second part of the reading for tonight, picking up from verse 11. Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she cried, she bent over to look into the tomb. She saw two angels dressed in white. They were seated where Jesus' body had been. One of them was where Jesus' head had been laid. The other sat where his feet had been placed. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They've taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they've put him." Then she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" She thought he was the gardener. So she said, "Sir, did you carry him away? Tell me where you've put him. Then I will go and get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned towards him. Then she cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni." Rabboni means teacher. And Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Instead, go to those who believe in me. Tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news. She said, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. Picking up on that, I wanted to look at a series of pictures, some of which we have looked at before, which are the experience of Mary in the garden, some of which we've obviously touched on already this evening. This from the Methodist Art Collection, Roy de Maistre's Noli Me Tangere, "Do Not Touch Me Not," or sometimes translated as "Do Not Hold On To Me." I've slightly lightened the picture in order to show some of the detail. But there's a number of cross references going on here. I mean, it's about Mary on her knees. Mary Magdalene, one of the stories, of course, is that Mary anoints the feet of Jesus when she would have been on her knees to do that. And Jesus is there standing. Jesus is partially clothed, though you can see his side. And he's holding a lantern, which I find interesting. It's almost like the light of the world picture. You've got the darkness of and almost the storm clouds in the background, which are now passing away. there's different things going on here. And one of the things we were talking about at Mickle Hill this morning is whether we are Mary people in our understanding of resurrection, or whether we are Peter people who rushes in to see what's going on, or whether we're Thomas people who have some doubts and want to see it for ourselves. And maybe at different times in our religious journey, we're different people as well. But what would our reaction be to being Mary in the garden? And again, picking up more on the words than on the picture, Jesus first of all calls her a woman, echoing the words of the two white figures, and only then, when he calls her by name, does she recognize his voice and recognize who it is, which I think John is back referencing John chapter 10, the Good Shepherd story. You know, I know my sheep, I call them by name. This is a new image that we've not seen before, and I just happened to come across Resurrection in the Garden by Helen Sheriff. I think, have I got a better picture? No, I'll just expand this up a bit so you can see. You need to get it to this sort of level to realise this is a tabletop. So if you imagine a fold down gate leg table, so she's repurposed a tabletop, and then across it she's painted the garden scene, and at the bottom here Mary's hand has become part of the lily. You've got the water lilies which leads up to Jesus, and it's almost is a path for him out into the living garden. And that's her idea of, as it says, she thought he was the gardener. So I'll just read a little bit about what she said. The gardener depicts Mary Magdalene seeing the resurrected Jesus and assuming he is the gardener. She says, I used what I found, a divided tabletop made of medium density fiberboard. I do like the detail. Not just any bit of fiberboard, it's medium density fiberboard, just so you know, with a parquetry veneer made to imitate wood. It's almost egg-shaped, which seemed appropriate for Easter. But I had to break it as it was too big and heavy to carry. This way I could transport the central painted section between my art studio and home. I came to identify with this broken shape myself. The outer sections I buried in garden rubbish for a few months to deteriorate, so it was warped, stained and fretted away. I imagine them to be like myself when I'm not looking at Jesus. Entropy prevails, going back to what Graham was saying about energy changes. In the shadow of the figure of Jesus, I healed the division between the two sides of the table with cotton cloth, pasted on and then painted over. Mary is shielding her face from the light which she is looking into, seeming to come from behind Jesus. We've seen some of that imagery earlier. Normally there would be a shadow stretching forward, but this darkness is light. And she quotes 1 John 1:5, God is light and in him there is no darkness at all. Her hand held up to shield her face from the light is echoed by the stargazer lily behind it, even as the fingers of her hand echo the lily. They are part of the flourishing garden, painted in the shape of an enlightened shadow. The outline of Jesus was cut out. I inserted a piece of thick tree bark which had a scar in an appropriate place, suggesting a wound. The bark indicates the original tree, as Jesus is the originator of all. Creator, caretaker, gardener.
Is it a miniature then, Peter? Because on my screen, it's bigger than it is in reality if it's 15 by 10.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it says, but
Tiny.
I copied this, and actually, looking at the bit of paper I've got in front of me, it says 1.5 by 1.07 meters.
That's more like it.
So I think, yeah, I just copied that from a website, and I hadn't looked at that difference, but it is not tiny. It's 1.5 meters.
Yeah, so it should be. Yeah.
Table.
About the sea. Yeah.
Yeah,
I am still awake.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad other people pick me up. I will change that before I show this ever again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I picked the picture up from a different place than I picked up the information.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
But I thought the explanation, the
Yeah.
mind
Reasoning.
thinking that has gone into it, you get inside the mind of the artist in reading her thought patterns and her artistic patterns in creativity. I thought that was lovely and actually quite helpful. I mean, I think, yeah, it takes you to a different place in the imagery.
Just you have to see the figure eventually.
I don't know whether it's true, and I would need to check back, but the Women's World Day of Prayer picture from Australia a few years ago, I've got a feeling might have been by her as well, because there's a great similarity in the colour depiction. I'd have to go back and look. But, I put this in. I mean, it's not directly referencing the Mary story. I've not shown you the Martin Erspeimer pictures. I think I showed you one last time because I just said that I found them a bit twee and a bit sentimental. And this is entirely different to what's in the rest of the collection, the book, because I don't think he finished the Stations of the Cross series. I think this is pulled out from somewhere else. And indeed, you can see it's stained glass and not a painting. But I thought that, again, the commentary was interesting. On Easter Day, the sun rose, and so did the Christ, the eternal icon for humanity. And of course, whenever we think about icons, is this an icon referencing the resurrection body, even when the icon is of Jesus active and as part of a gospel story. Still, I think that iconic picture of Jesus surely is something that is timeless and outside of just a corporal being. Where he has gone, we will most surely follow. So it's that sense that he's now opened the door for us to life, eternal life, and to heaven. And this too is slightly cosmic. It's placed against the stars of the night sky. It's interesting if you talk about this being an icon, that the bit that makes Jesus usually iconic is the fact that he has a beard, and Jesus is clean shaven and a younger man. And this is our last image for tonight and for this series. This came from a series that I picked up a few years ago called An Easter Journey. Most of the pictures I think I would call a Holy Week journey. And they're images from Luton teenagers. Let me just bring up the full thing on my screen so that I can read the words.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I've got stuff across the screen, so I can't see the words on mine. So the top left, up in this corner, it says 8 thoughts by Luton teenagers on themes reflecting the Christian tradition. And so they got teenagers with all sorts of different, if I say issues, you know what I mean? So, and if I pick up the words at the bottom, you might better read it. So I'll read what it says. So I'm dyslexic, and sometimes it's so frustrating. It's like you want to say something, but the words don't come out right. They get trapped in your head. You try to get your thoughts out, but you can't. For me, art is the way I express myself. It helps me to say that the things that are inside me. It gives me hope that what I can say, it gives me hope that I can say what I need to say, and that maybe people will understand me. This picture is how I see hope, the idea of light shining on someone in darkness. I can't explain it in words, but at least I can draw something about how I feel. And so they pick that up. You want to say something, but the words are trapped in your head, and they've used art in order to portray it. And I just thought it was an interesting depiction. I'm sure the person who painted it wouldn't claim to be a great artist, but they are now using art in order to depict something that they can't express in words. And it seems to me that's really what we've been trying to work through over the last few weeks. So we have the words of the gospel stories, we have our own words, but words often do fail us, not because we're dyslexic necessarily, just because we can't put into English, into words, what we want to say. And I just thought this was a fascinating and I think, I hope, a helpful ending to the series of trying to depict something that is impossible to put into language.